Nowadays, Spanish is spoken by tens of millions of people in the United States, but will it ever turn into an official language there? Don't forget to subscribe to Lang Explorer to show your support. English is the only official language in the United States, which is home to many immigrants stemming from Spanish-speaking countries, and it isn't uncommon to hear Spanish spoken there. In addition, it's now a popular foreign language, and the number of people who are fluent in this tongue is quickly increasing. Today, Spanish is spoken by around 50 million people in the United States, or nearly 15% of the total population. But will this language ever win its official status in the United States? In this video, we'll have a look on the future of Spanish in the United States. We tend to consider the United States a monolingual country, but historically speaking, the southern and western parts of the country were once Spanish and Mexican territories, and Spanish place names can still be found there. Specifically, state names such as Florida, Texas, Colorado, and California, and city names such as Los Angeles, San Francisco, San Antonio, and Santa Fe are of Spanish origin. Some inhabitants are descendants of those who settled there when these places were Spanish or Mexican territories, and have preserved the Spanish language since then. Furthermore, Puerto Rico, a Commonwealth, Guam, and Saipan are other former Spanish territories. Spanish is still the primary language spoken in Puerto Rico. And a lot of Spanish influence is still found in the Chamorro language used in Guam and Saipan. However, most Spanish speakers in the United States today are primarily immigrants from Mexico, El Salvador, Cuba, Honduras, Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, and other parts of Latin America since the 20th century, as well as their descendants. Regarding the number of current Spanish speakers in the United States, statistics exist about the population of those over 5 years old who speak Spanish at home. According to data in 2019, this number is 41.8 million in the United States and 44.6 million if Puerto Rico is included. It's 13.5% of the total population, an increase from 10 years ago. Texas has the highest percentage at 29.2%, followed by California at 28.8%, New Mexico at 26.5%, and Florida at 22.5%, while 13 of the 50 states have less than 3%, and Maine has the lowest percentage at less than 1%. By city, Santa Ana in the Los Angeles metropolitan area has the highest rate at 68.5%, followed by Miami at 67.7% and El Paso, Texas at 66.5%. As for huge cities, Los Angeles leads at 42.5%, followed by Houston, Texas at 39.1%, San Antonio, Texas at 38.1%, Phoenix, Arizona at 31.1%, New York City at 24.3%, and Chicago at 24%. Furthermore, there are 7.8 million people in the United States who don't use Spanish at home but are studying it, and if those who are fluent in Spanish are included, it's estimated that about 50 million people in the United States speak it. This number is the third largest in the Spanish-speaking world after Mexico and Colombia, and the United States is beginning to occupy an important position in the Spanish-speaking world as a whole. The number of Spanish speakers in the United States is therefore increasing, and it's common for some states to provide information in both English and Spanish and, in some cases, in other languages as well, although neither the federal government nor states stipulate Spanish as official. So it's correct to say that state governments provide information in Spanish for Latin American immigrants who aren't proficient in English, and in some cases, Spanish-speaking officers are available to help them. In addition, Spanish is increasingly being used in school education merely as a foreign language, and opportunities to use it in American society are limited. When considering what would change if Spanish became an official language in the United States, it helps to refer to its northern neighbor, Canada, where both English and French are official at the federal level. Knowledge of both languages is required to work for the federal government, and information should be provided in both on the packaging of products. In addition, schooling in Canada involves learning these two languages. However, it should be noted that the situation is very different between Canada and the United States, even for the same topic of bilingualism. In the case of Canada, French speakers are concentrated in Quebec and New Brunswick, and in other provinces, there are almost no opportunities to use French in daily life after school. Should both English and Spanish be official in the United States, everyday life in both languages will become commonplace, especially in the states and cities mentioned earlier. So public officials will be required to have knowledge of both English and Spanish, and perhaps other professionals will be required to have Spanish language skills as well. In addition, many of the large cities mentioned earlier, such as Los Angeles, New York, and Chicago, are globally influential, and companies from around the world that want to capture consumers in the United States will need to market not only in English but also in Spanish, which will further increase the need for professionals fluent in Spanish. In particular, since Asian corporations generally lack human resources ready to work in this language, more and more efforts will be made to prepare those who can work for this bilingual market. Furthermore, given the considerable gap of Spanish speakers within the United States, it's likely that some states, such as Texas and California, instead of the federal government, adopt Spanish before others. According to the 2019 statistics mentioned earlier, the top 5 states in terms of percentage of the population of Spanish speakers are Texas, California, New Mexico, Florida, and Nevada, of which Texas, California, and Florida have the top 3 populations in the United States. Should Spanish be official in these 3 states, the impact will be felt not only within these, but also in other states. In the case of California, this state is quite influential in the rest of the world, particularly with Silicon Valley and Hollywood, and more people will show interest in Spanish not only in other parts of the United States, but also throughout the world. On the other hand, when pursuing a career in today's U.S. society, the need for Spanish is somewhat restricted, except for some professions that are closely linked with Latinos, and it's certainly true that people can live their social life in English alone. If you interact with Latinos on a daily basis, it isn't hard to acquire Spanish at a conversational level or B1 level in CEFR, allowing you to enjoy content such as soap operas and music to some extent. But it's also true that there's little motivation to brush up Spanish further to B2 or C1 in CEFR, which is suitable for business meetings, international conferences, and academic meetings. This picture explains the trend among descendants of Latin American immigrants to shift to English rather than keeping Spanish. Those who want to use Spanish to strengthen their relationship with Latin America and Spain will study Spanish even more, but there aren't many situations requiring that level of Spanish proficiency as long as they stay in the United States, so it can be said that an intermediate level of Spanish proficiency is sufficient. In order to turn the United States into a bilingual society, it's necessary to include Spanish as part of the curriculum in school education, for example, by requiring students to take classes in Spanish on top of English at universities. The importance of schooling was already presented in a previous discussion on adopting English as an official language, but the same can be said for Spanish too. In addition to this, it's likely that resistance against this bilingualism will emerge as the need to speak Spanish increases while previously English only used to be enough. Indeed, not a few people in the United States oppose the widespread use of any language other than English, and they're likely to build up a powerful resistance against the official use of Spanish. So, it'll be necessary to calm down this refusal and to build a consensus that embracing Spanish will ultimately benefit the whole United States. In fact, it seems premature for Spanish to be official in the entire United States. It's true that in some areas, Spanish is spoken on a daily basis in addition to English, and the public administration is responding to this reality, but there are still many areas where Spanish speakers are scarce, and currently, there's no consensus yet to make Spanish another official language. In the United States, a nation of immigrants, there's a tradition that those from abroad learn English instead of sticking to their native language and integrate into the local community, but Latinos continue to speak Spanish and want their US-born children and grandchildren to inherit it, which is a feature to make them very different from other immigrants. So the question is, if the United States embraces the Latin American culture on top of their language and tries to turn into a bilingual nation where both English and Spanish cultures intermingle, or this country keeps the tradition that immigrants, regardless of their native language, must learn English and linguistically and culturally assimilate. Now, let's summarize what we've learned today. 1. Currently, in the United States, some 45 million people speak Spanish at home, and it's estimated that 50 million people, or 15% of the population, speak it. Its speakers are very unevenly distributed, and in some states, nearly 30% of the population uses it at home. 2. Should Spanish be official in the United States, the public administration will be obliged to provide information in both English and Spanish and to respond to citizens in both languages. For now, some states do this already, but all public officials will be required to be fluent in both English and Spanish if the latter becomes official. 3. Also, since the percentage of Spanish speakers varies significantly from state to state, it's possible that Spanish be official only in those states with a high percentage of Spanish speakers, rather than the entire United States. Some of such states have large populations, so should Spanish be official there, such a linguistic policy can impact the rest of the United States and even corporations all over the world aiming at conducting their businesses there. 4. On the other hand, the level of Spanish required in the United States is daily conversation, or B1 and CEFR at best, and there are few opportunities to acquire higher-level Spanish, such as business and academy. In addition, some people oppose the official status of Spanish, so it's necessary to build a consensus in the United States to make Spanish official. 5. Furthermore, immigrants in the United States have traditionally been expected to learn English and integrate into the local society, which will drastically change should Spanish be official, creating a new national identity that is a mixture of two cultures, namely English-speaking one and Spanish-speaking one. Thank you for watching this video. We're looking forward to seeing you in the next one.